This is the Balanced Advisor Podcast with Dr. Travis Perry, helping financial advisors like you achieve balance in their lives.
Hey there, welcome to another episode of the Balanced Advisor Podcast. I am your guest, Dr. Travis Perry. Today, we have with us Mr. Chip Munn. He's an author, podcast host, senior wealth advisor, and CEO of Signature Wealth Group. Since 2016, Chip and his team have grown their practice by 7 times to just over $2 billion in client assets, with offices throughout North Carolina, South Carolina, and Kentucky. One thing that's unique about Chip is that while he and his team have experienced rapid growth, he's still actively engaged with clients on a daily basis and even wrote a book, The Retirement Remix, in 2020, perfect timing, to encourage investors to rethink the relationship between their work and their life. And so we connect. Chip, welcome to the show. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks, Travis. I'm excited to be with you.
Yeah, this is fantastic. I love, we're talking in the pre-show about kind of how your book came about and where this is going and what a great timing it is. But you weren't always an advisor. You started off as a 6th grade teacher, and so appropriate maybe for these times. Take those skills today to those out there who are really struggling as you educate and teach. But I'll let you tell the story. How did you get into this industry? How did you decide to go from teaching to advising?
So it's, like a lot of people, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. As a 22-year-old college graduate with an elementary education degree, I thought I wanted to be a school teacher. That's what I love. Young people thought that that's what I want to do, and I enjoy teaching. And in many ways, I still do that. But I got into as it turned out, again, elementary ed degree from Clemson, go Tigers, and but ended up teaching the 6th grade. And I was 22, the students were 12, and frankly, we had way too much in common. We liked the same music, the same video games. It was just one of those things that was a bad fit for me because, I'm a problem solver, and sometimes in the school system, it's hard to solve your own problem in a situation like that. So about halfway through the school year, Travis, I didn't know what I was going to do, but a lot of people over the last few years, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew what I wasn't going to do. And that was teach school for another year. So midway through the first year, one of the ways that it works with teaching is you have to let them know mid-year whether or not you're planning to come back. So by spring break, after Christmas, you're having to let them know. And of course I said, I'm not. And they had a lot of questions. And frankly, I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I wasn't going to keep teaching school. Turns out, as I thought about, I really thought that I was going to go to law school, wanted to be an estate planner, ironically, in part because my family literally were the people who lost the family farm to the death tax. So my granddad died. We had to sell the farm in order to pay the government. And I didn't like that. So I was really interested in how not to have that ever happen to my family or anybody else again. But as it turns out, they don't really care to admit a tremendous number of elementary school teachers to law school. And so that, my alternative direction, frankly, was to get into the planning world in a different way. And so I was fortunate enough to get connected with a financial advisor that really kind of stoked my interest. Honestly, originally, in addition to my planning interest, it was a sales job. And so that was how it was presented to me, like you'll be able to do planning, but the business was different back in 1998. And so, but from there, what I pretty quickly found out was that I partnered up. My partner, Scott Mitchell, and I have been together for going on 24 years. And he and his dad loved investments. I loved planning. And so from 1999, January of 99 until now, we've kind of built on the foundation of I did the things that I enjoyed and was good at. He and his dad, who has since retired, did the things that they enjoyed and they were good at. And we've just kind of built out from there.
I get it. That makes sense. Like you have a personal experience that drove you really to find a solution and help other people so they don't have to have the same issues that you had. And man, you've grown your business. You've written several books. You're, out there preaching, teaching, and growing at a scale that a lot of advisors, can really, really admire. What is your definition of balance? I mean, you've got a family, you've got time you need to spend working on yourself and then running the business and everything that you're doing, all the hats you're wearing. Talk to us about what your definition is of balance.
So when I think about balance, what comes to mind is being where I am. And what I mean by that is I've lived plenty of time in my life and I still suffer from it when I'm at work thinking about home and I'm at home thinking about work. And, by no means is it am I a finished product, but it is, I think that for me, when in balance, I am able to be present. And I think that is, that's the best definition. I heard somebody recently on another podcast say something to the effect of success to them was having enough money that you don't have to worry about money and enough time that you don't have to worry about time. And I think that for me, balance is represented by, or when I'm in balance, it means that I can be where I am. I can be present in the moment, whether that's in a meeting with a client, or whether that is being life coach to my children, or at dinner on a date with my wife.
Love this. Yeah, being present is so incredibly difficult. The fact that we talk about it all the time. That it is a constant battle. Technology, maybe a little ADD. A lot of us running businesses have great ideas all over the place, right? That's a little bit of what's going on. But what do you think for you is probably the biggest issue of you staying present, being present? Because obviously it's a conscious effort. This is not something that is easily done, but it is a conscious effort for you to do that. What are some of the biggest pitfalls or issues that you see that are keeping you from being present?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest issue that I've had to continue to work on is trying to do too much. Is trying to take too many. There's the old saying that if everything's a priority, nothing is a priority. And so, one of the things that I've had to be real diligent about is understanding that I can't do. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And so that I have a tendency, particularly with the different hats that I wear, to try to accomplish too much too quickly. And so I think that for me, a big part of trying to continually kind of come back to or to find balance is being aware of how much I can reasonably get done in any given period of time. So I think that's the trying to cram 10 pounds of stuff into a 5-pound bag. And I think that a big part for me is realizing, sometimes I think I'm Superman, right? And that I do have finite capabilities and time and attention. And so I think that's a big part of it. And then attention is a big thing. It is managing energy and attention, I think, is incredibly important for me, and something that I've struggled at and I have to work on is making sure that I'm being mindful of those two things.
Yeah, you mentioned two really important aspects: energy, attention, actually three, and coming back to balance. In my book, Achieving Balance, we talk about this. My dad was a pilot and he was always saying we're off course most of the time as pilots. Like, we're constantly getting back on course. And that's how I view balance personally. It's like, hey, you can set a course, you can have goals, you can have a direction, but you're going to constantly getting off course. In fact, I was listening to a book just yesterday on my way home. I try to listen to something on the way home. I only have a 7-minute commute, so it's not too long. But and on Fridays, my commute is up the stairs. I do a little bit of work downstairs in the home office. But the reality is, I was listening to this book about just getting to this meditative state. And a lot of people think meditation is just like silent. There's nothing going on. And you've got this full focus attention. And they are trying to, rebuff that myth of just saying, no, it's constantly getting back to balance, back to center, they call it. Same idea. What do you think? Is it the energy? Is it the attention refocusing? What helps you come back to balance? Because we know we're not supermen or women. It just, we are human, and we have to get back to this balance spot. What helps you to do that?
Well, so for me, I think a big part of it is being intentional and defining what that looks like. And it's a process, right, that goes from business planning all the way back to planning your day. What I find helps me is, and it's morphed over the years, I developed something for myself several years ago. I called the Daily Maximizer. I've since heard I don't know if you know, Coach Joe Lucas has what he calls the Magellan Morning 8, and I've kind of co-opted into the Signature 6 for our company and for our team. But really, it's starting the day with a morning routine that defines, what my expectations for the day are. Because what I find is, if I'm reactive in my day, it's very hard to figure out, going back to your analogy with your dad, if I don't chart the course ahead of time, I don't know where I'm trying to get back to. So for me, starting the day and for now that it's kind of I call it the Signature 6, it's an acronym that spells out serve 'em, right? Because that's a big thing for me. And that's starting big. So beginning my day in gratitude, BIG, asking empowering questions. Things like, what am I going to do today to make myself uncomfortable? Reviewing my daily game plan. So knowing what my priorities are for the day, visualizing what the day is. And I found that, Travis, to be incredibly helpful in terms of staying focused and staying calm and staying balanced, is to have visualized what my plan for the day is, the meetings, those kinds of things. And then exercise and meditation. So, SERVEM. And it really helps me because, again, I know where the course is. And I and on the days that I start the morning that way, the day goes really well. If I ever am off in the morning, I'll be there. There's a strong chance I'll be off all day because I didn't adequately set the course. And of course, the daily comes from a weekly, comes from a monthly. I mean, but it is, so for me, I think that's the biggest part. And the other thing where I mentioned, reviewing the daily game plan, part of that for me is 3 tasks to complete. And those can be meetings, those can be client calls, they can be staff, something that I have to do, but laying out what my top 3 priorities are so that I know that at the end of the day, and I'm one who works on them in order. So I start with number 1 and I work on it until I'm done and really trying to focus on that. But what I've found is 2 things. Number 1, when I lay the day out ahead of time and have that course, and these 3 things are part of that, then I know what it is I'm trying to get done. And number 2, when I've finished the first 3 things, I've now, after a lot of work, given myself permission to accept that I've done enough for today if that's all I got done. Doesn't mean I stop. What I normally do is I reprioritize what's left and I start back at number 1. But if I've gotten through the 3 things that in the morning I said were the 3 most important things for the day, if you do that over a course of 200 plus days, office days, let's call them, you've gotten 600 important things done over the course of a year. That's plenty enough to move the needle. And I think that for me, part of where I run out of balance is when I've got a list of 9 things I've got to get done and I'm jumping all over the place. What I have found is being a little more organized on the front end, and that morning process may take 20 minutes, including 5 minutes of exercise, just getting the blood flowing. It doesn't have to be super complicated, but for me, I think that helps me kind of get back into balance on a daily basis.
Yeah. What you said that's crucial. Like you talked about from the micro or from macro, having big goals and connecting those down to the micro of having morning routines. Literally yesterday, talking to my coaching clients about the morning routine and how to set it up and get things going. And like, you're exactly right. When you have an excellent morning routine, both personal and business, like you're on a good trajectory to start. And it's really hard to go wrong when you've got a great start. Not that it can't happen. It happens all the time. And, but I like what you said there, whether you get done early or something happens, you reprioritize. I think that's kind of that's the rebalancing, right? It's a rebalancing act every day. So I love this. When it comes to scaling your business without losing this balance that you've created, what would you say your biggest struggle is there? What's something that you're like, man, I wish that would, take care of itself as you're trying to market, lead, being productive? Like, what is it that's maybe is a bottleneck for you without losing that balance that you've so described?
Yeah, I think that probably, so I'm going to frame it a different way, if you don't mind. If I were giving myself advice, so if I were looking at my situation and saying, if I were you, this is how I would help, right? Then, because we're often terrible at taking our own advice, aren't we? And so it would be to let go of things faster. So I would consider myself to be a pretty good delegator or elevator, however you want to look at it. I'm pretty good at finding other folks whose unique ability is different than mine, and allowing them to run with whatever area. And frankly, that's probably the biggest reason we've been able to be successful, is because I am eventually able to get out of my own way and let somebody else take charge of things that aren't my kind of area of unique ability. But I could certainly do that faster. I like a lot of people, have a tendency to hold on to me being the person who needs to do something. I have a tendency to eventually let it go when it's painful enough, but I've probably already held on too long. So I think that's probably an area where, there's room for development, because while I eventually get there, I go through more pain, or I'm off course probably longer than I have to be. And of course, you use the pilot analogy. With clients, I normally use the one of sailing, where if you're 2 degrees off for an hour in the ocean, you're okay, but you can course correct pretty easily. But if you're 2 degrees off for a week, you're in a completely different country, most likely. So again, I follow my own advice. I think that I probably could course correct or let some things go more frequently, would probably be an area for improvement.
Well, you're in good company, Chip. There's most guests that I've ever interviewed have talked something about this, getting out of their own way, not being able to delegate, holding on too long, too much. This is an issue that I know I'll be talking about probably in my next book, the things, that we're preparing for now, because it comes up all the time. Yet, like you said, taking our own advice. What would you say has been the best piece of advice for you to let go, to get out of your own way, to letting, delegating whatever it is to that team member, or other, service or individual? What has been working for you when you notice, like, oh man, yeah, I am letting go faster, I am delegating?
So I think a couple of things. I think one of the bigger learning points for me is my team and I earlier, well, I guess within the last year or so, did a strategic coach teams program where they came in and they worked through our unique ability conversation, the unique ability and kind of doing what you love and you're good at. And we did that with the whole team. I had done it previously as kind of the entrepreneur in this situation. I had already done it, but we did it with the whole team. And one of the things that we found out, Travis, was that one of our administrative folks didn't like making outbound phone calls, and the other one didn't like to do paperwork. And so, but both of them were tasked with the same job. And very quickly we realized, well, why don't we just have one of you do the administrative ops paperwork and the other do the outbound, client touch base calls and that kind of thing. And so it was really eye-opening for me because I had always been gotten pretty clear on what I'm good at and what I'm not. Again, my partner and I've been together for 24 years. I haven't run my own retirement portfolio. So as it comes to investments, if I can ever retire, it'll be at least from an investment standpoint because of the way that he managed the money, because he's the one who handles that part. But I had not done an effective job of understanding better, asking the right questions of my team. And so really getting into, I knew what I thought they were good at, but just because they were good at it and they were willing to do it because I asked them to doesn't mean they enjoyed it and doesn't mean it was their kind of, again, unique abilities on a genius, whatever you want to call it. And so for me, as I have developed as a leader, I think that's been the biggest thing, is taking it outside of myself and asking better questions of the people that I'm working with, because it allows them the same opportunities that I have. And, again, my job as a leader is to create a safe space for these conversations where they're comfortable saying, I really don't like doing paperwork, even though I'm an admin, I'm in an admin position. Then, so I think that's kind of the biggest thing, is that getting to a place where I'm willing to ask the questions of other people to try to make sure that, again, what I'm good at delegating wise, and I had a conversation actually with our team this morning, is normally when I'm delegating something, I'm solving my problem in my mind. And what they reminded me was, no, you're not solving your problem. You're giving your problem to somebody else. And instead, what I'm learning to do is to involve more people in the determination of what the solution ought to be. And I have found that over the last even 3 or 4 months, as I continue to evolve, that to be really helpful in coming up with collective solutions and workflows and that are outcome driven, but that the solution is come up with by all of the stakeholders versus, what would typically be my mindset, to bury myself in figuring out what the solution should be and then telling it to everybody else.
Yeah, great. And, as an educator, you understand how to make that happen, right? You know how to teach people. I think a big part of the delegation, as you mentioned, is involving others. And like you said, it's not just getting rid of my problem, but it is essentially giving somebody else a task. But if there's ongoing education, I talk to my clients all the time about, hey, this isn't just a one-time thing. Like, you don't just train somebody and you're done. Like, it's always training. You're always training them. How often you train them is really the question. So I love that you're getting them together and you're talking this through and you're getting feedback. Great advice. I know our time is closing in on us right now. If you were to give advisors who are trying to scale without losing their balance some advice, what would be maybe some last parting words of wisdom you would say to them, helping what helped you get to where you are today?
Well, I think that the first piece of advice I would give them is to get still and to get intentional. I talked with an advisor yesterday who is probably going to do something different with one of his team members. And we talked about not jumping directly into just hiring the next person, but instead sitting in it for a little while, really thinking about what the next best thing to do is and being really intentional about how you're building your organization, whether your organization is you and a shared support person or it's 40 or 50 people, doesn't really matter. Being intentional. Travis, I have a paper. I read the E-Myth back in 2002, I think it was, and was on vacation and had a paper plate that where it talks about draw out your ideal organizational structure. And it was the middle of the night. I was on vacation. So I did it on the back of a paper plate, and it had like 12 or 14 spots on it. I don't have the plate anymore. I eventually threw it away, but I have a photocopy of it. And our organization looks at least similar to that, but a lot of it has been being willing to be really intentional. And the other thing is, after you do that, is find good people and find the right people and find them earlier rather than later. I see a big mistake in my mind is, we run ourselves to kind of the red line till we're redlined and burn out before we look to hire people. And I'm a big believer in hiring before need, because oftentimes you can't get where you're going if you're burnt out, and you can't teach anybody once you're burnt out. So you really have to be mindful of, once you figure out kind of with some intention where you're going, then begin the process of getting there sooner rather than later. Because especially now, it's hard to find people. I mean, it's not easy to find talent in our industry. And so, again, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Be willing to hire in advance of the need, the right people, so that, again, because if you can stay balanced, we're the product at the end of the day. And so we have to maintain kind of the take care of ourselves. And I think a big part of that is not burning out. And I've done it a couple of times. So not recommended.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we're preaching against. But if you are burning out, you're probably not as intentional, probably not getting still. And it's likely that you don't have the right people on the bus. Two things that you mentioned, the E-Myth. So I consider myself Michael Gerber's grandson. Like, what? You're a Perry. Well, I know. Well, that's because the guy, one of his very first coaches, Dave Crenshaw, I wrote The Myth of Multitasking. Great coach of mine back in the day, was one of Gerber's first coaches in the E-Myth. And I learned and trained from him and have a lot of very similar attitudes and mindsets. So we definitely connect on this. I totally understand the E-Myth. I actually give that book to my clients because it's such a pivotal piece of work of knowing, what kind of hat are you wearing right now? I love that. I hope you take you had that picture, frame it or something, or put it in the office someplace where you can remember, like, this is what the vision was, and this is where we're at. Sort of this is where we were, and this is how it's going, sort of a reconnection. That's what a great thing to have. But the other one that you mentioned is getting the right people on the bus in Good to Great. It talks about how it's not just getting the right managers, but it's getting the right people on the bus who are intentional, who understand, who, if you left, they could still run the company and continue on this culture. So I absolutely 100% agree with you. And yes, it's difficult to find right now. I've had Stephanie Roberts on the show and others who talk about, recruiting and things, but I think she's like episode 5 or 6 of the podcast. A great one to listen to if you're struggling with that specific need. Well, this has been awesome. Chip, thank you for your time. Thanks for making time and for giving back to this community. Tell us a little bit about Maximum Advisor. Tell us about what you're doing for advisors to help them. If they want to connect with you, maybe give us a real quick rundown on what that is. Yeah,
sure. So the Maximum Advisor podcast is my opportunity to kind of give back to advisors, to a community that's been so good to me. It's available on iTunes or wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. But I've interviewed people like Michael Kitsis, Duncan McPherson, Alan Moore, lots of people that I just find fascinating. And I ask them questions. It's very similar to this. It's an opportunity to listen to two people talk about things that are of interest to them, and just to be able to sit and listen in. I do a little bit of one-on-one consulting for people who I would call it more consulting than coaching. So folks are welcome to check it out. MaximumAdvisor.com is the website, or it's available on any of the, on the podcasting platforms. But it's my way of, again, asking questions that I think ought to be asked of people I feel like have the answers. And so it's been a really neat opportunity to get to do. And I would welcome anybody if they have questions or any way that I can be of service, they're welcome to reach out to me. My email is chip@signaturewealth.com. And I'm happy to help any way I can.
Thanks, Chip. I appreciate your willingness to help the community, and definitely check out maximumadvisor.com and the podcast, the scorecard, great resources for you there. Thank you again for being on the show and for your contribution.
My pleasure. Enjoyed being with you.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this as much as I have, like, share, comment, and pass this along to advisors who need it, more balance and scale in their life. You can learn from Chip. You can learn from content we've talked about today that's hopefully been enlightening and enjoyable as much as it has been for me to listen to Chip and interact. So thanks everybody for being here and for being the balanced advisors that you are. Until next time.